starting out with Mark's gospel. Usually this time folks want to hear more of the birth narrative or say we've heard enough of that and we're ready to move on, but Mark just dispenses with it in his gospel. And so with him dispensing with that, there are times when we don't hear some other parts about it, but I won't miss out on an opportunity for us to celebrate Epiphany. Now, some of you may know, and we're going to get to that so you can sort of, be at ease. We're going to have stars. You're going to get stars at the end of the service, a little later on. It has become something that we do here at Hope, and that's that there are stars that have words on them. And it initially started where there are words to guide us. And we're, of course, thinking about the three wise ones. And it is three, but actually there were more than just three. We don't know that three was the number. We also don't know their names, but over the tradition of years, tradition has been added in. So you might have heard Melchior and Gaspar and Balthazar, or I don't know, Larry, Moe, and Curly. You can call them whatever you'd like, but they are not kings so much as wise ones, wise people, sages. In Greek, it's magoi, which means sort of magic ones, magi. It's people of other religions. They were following the stars, reading the stars to see what the stars would say. Anybody here check their horoscope? That's something about stars. And it's seeing the way the stars are aligned, what shall we do, what shall we not do. These were probably Zoroastrian. And so part of that figuring it out was, so what's going on in the world? And there's something special happening. There was a star that rose. And as we're getting to this story about it, Matthew tells about Jesus. And so when we get to this place, always in Scripture, there is a marker for the time we're talking about. So this one starts, this is Matthew chapter 2, verses 1 through 12. In the time of King Herod, and so that's a marker for what was happening, what was going on. And King Herod he liked to create a lot of places where people would say, "Ooh, that Herod, he is a fine guy. Ooh, he knows how to really spruce things up." And he did, but he also knew how to get those who were in his way out of his way. He offed some of his family members because they weren't going along with King Herod. He utilized funds, wonder what those were going for, but he had them to build up the temple, and he built a lot of fortresses. Masada, you've heard maybe of Masada. That was one of those places that were built. So it was to build up the embattlements, to build up ways so that the people would be safe and would be well tended to. And I think from King Herod, they would think themselves to be well loved. At least that was the story that they have. King Herod seemed to be a little bit of an insecure kind of guy. So listen. In the time of King Herod, after Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea, wise men from the east came to Jerusalem asking, "Where is the child who has been born King of the Jews? For we observed his star at its rising, and have come to pay him homage." When King Herod, who by the way was not really a king, but called himself such because he was not king because Caesar was the king. But anyway, I mince words. When King Herod heard this, he was frightened, and all Jerusalem with him. So not only was King Herod shaking in his boots, all of Jerusalem said, "What's going on here?" Anyway, calling together all the chief priests and scribes of the people, he inquired of them where the Messiah was to be born. They told him, "In Bethlehem of Judea, for so it has been written by the prophet. And you, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah, for from you shall come a ruler who is to shepherd my people Israel." Then Herod secretly called for the wise men and learned from them the exact time when the star had appeared. Then he sent them to Bethlehem, saying, "Go and search diligently for the child, and when you have found him, bring me word, so that I may also go and pay him homage." When they had heard the king, they set out, and there ahead of them went the star that they had seen at its rising, until it stopped over the place where the child was. When they saw that the star had stopped, they were overwhelmed with joy. On entering the house, they saw the child with Mary, his mother, and they knelt down and paid him homage. Then opening their treasure chests, they offered him gifts like gold and frankincense and myrrh. And having been warned in a dream not to return to Herod, they left for their own country by another road. And the gifts that they offered, of course, were things that you would offer to one who is a king, who was more than a king. They offered him gold, which would be for a king, for a royalty, and frankincense or incense, which would be used by priests. And Jesus also, priest and king. And myrrh is always an interesting one, and if you're recalling your "We Three Kings of Orient," you're going through, you don't have to worry to get so far, because these are the spices that go along with, say, aloes and things like that, for dressing a body of someone who had died. And so in these gifts, we see that they are giving honor. And this is following some of the ancient texts and things like that. But when I get to this place, we always call this the incarnation. They were called to go from the east, where they had come, and they'd come to honor this king. Now, we in the world in which we live think that everybody was going to be converted. They weren't being converted to Judaism. They weren't being converted to Christians, because there was no such thing at the time. They were coming because that's what you do, is you pay homage, you honor, you give respect. You say, something amazing is happening here. And it isn't according to my religion or my faith or your faith. It's saying something amazing has happened, and the stars have aligned. The stars have even lined up together. And here's a special one. Jesus was born in this day and time when the people knew oppression. They had been taken captive a number of times, had been brought back, and had been taken again in captivity, and things around them had been destroyed. It sounds pretty familiar. People were killed. In fact, when Herod heard that these young ones, the newborns were coming about, he actually had instituted what was called then the slaughter of the innocents, or what we've come to call slaughter of the innocents. He thought he'd get rid of this little baby king by killing all of the children a year old or younger. So Herod had his means. And so when Jesus comes, he's coming not to oppose, or at least not to stand up against Herod, at least not the way Herod is thinking. But when the stars align in just such a way, when others follow it, they were looking for light. People today are looking for light. You and I are looking for light, I think. I recall on January 1st, I hadn't partied too awful much. I mean, staying up to see the ball drop and all that sort of thing. And that's about the extent of the partying that happened in our house, which is pretty wild, I have to tell you. But I woke up in the morning to hear the radio and hearing the news and to hear what's happening. And I don't even recall exactly what it was, but I recall having this... And in that place between being partially awake but not fully awake, and being still sort of asleep but not fully asleep, there was this sort of terror, this worry, like, what in the world? What we've come through in 2023, but 2024, I don't know. Already the first thing I hear is be afraid, be very afraid. Be worried, be very worried. I hope that is not what you woke up to. I hope very much that is not what greeted you. But I say that because not to say I'm a gloom and doom person. I am not. I am far from a gloom and doom individual. And so it surprised even me. What is happening? We all look for light And so it makes sense that on Epiphany we look for that light. Epiphany itself means showing forth. We're looking for something good to show forth. And some would say that it's the three wise men coming and they showed their faces to Jesus, some would say. They showed forth who they were. Or some would say it was Jesus, who it was God, them seeing God in the face of this child. Him showing forth it was God coming to be among us. We refer to it as incarnation, putting on flesh. And it is a point of controversy and has been for a couple thousand years. Yet what those wise ones were here to do was something that we still struggle with today. And that Herod really is the one who's having the most struggle, because Herod wanted to make sure that these wise guys didn't interrupt his power. Wanted to make sure that these folks from off, when I was in South Carolina, if you weren't born there several generations back, you were from off. That means you weren't a brought-in, like I was told in Bardstown, Kentucky. If you weren't born in that area of Kentucky, you were a brought-in. Brought-ins from off. Not one of us, you know. You aren't from around here, are you, partner? And over the last 4+ years, we have gotten really good at making sure that's one of the questions that goes through our minds. We don't have to ask it, but we already do it. Are you one of us? Is he? Is she? Are they one of us? Herod was doing that, and he wanted to make sure that he held on to power, because he did not himself know the prophecies about who this Messiah would be. He himself, who was supposedly a good follower of Judaism, he himself did not know these stories. He had to have others come and tell him. He had someone coming from off, 3 someones coming from off to tell him. What would this mean? What could God possibly be up to? And rather than Herod thinking, wow, this is amazing, saying, oh, this is not good, I better squelch this right away. It's all going to be bad. It's all going to be bad. That's what's going to happen. I better get folks on my side. Let me go and get these folks who are from off. They don't know. They're not from around here. Would you go and check on this child? And when you find him, because I haven't a clue, when you find him, you come back so I too can go and pay him homage. I think that for us, I'm grateful for us that we recognize those who wink and nod. I'm grateful that we look to see what's going on here, because there are conspiracies that fly about all over the place. And conspiracy means breathing together, breathing together. And so the conspiracies that happen are, let's say this is what's going on, and we trust those conspiracies when in fact there have been writings for thousands of years, and there has been evidence that light and love and grace and goodness are the things that will last, are the things that we need. But you and I have an easier time believing the shadows, believing the conspiracies, thinking that it's all going to go south, sometimes in a handbasket. The 3 wise ones paid attention to signs. They paid attention to what wisdom had come to teach them and tell them. And so we have a choice at this point, or each point of each day, to say, am I going to believe the goodness and going to believe the good things that I've heard, or that God indeed does have good things in mind for this world in which we live? Or is it all going to go south? Are we going to believe those conspiracies? That doesn't mean to be aware, but it does mean for us to pay attention to the signs. What are the signs you pay attention to? As people of faith, we are also called people of the Word. And some think that it would be a word meaning just the Bible. These words that are printed in black and white. But what the three wise ones came to see was the living Word, Jesus. The living Word. And so God has spoken to us, to all of creation, in words and in stars and in so many different ways. And what we come to understand is that what I've come to understand is that our proclivity is to make sure that we are part of those who are in and make sure we keep out those who are out. But the life of faith is lived in a different way. The life of faith is for us to recognize and realize, and whether or not you totally believe it or not, is to know and trust that there is a power greater than anything we can create, who made all things, who even made light, separated light from darkness. Now, that may be a myth to some. It may say, well, no, this flies in the face of science. It doesn't fly in the face of science. Somehow or other, there was a big bang. Have you ever heard of that? Light and darkness, all that stuff, and something happened. I love that Far Side cartoon where all of the equations are on the board, written all the way through, and then here's this amazing thing, and at the middle is there's someone writing with it saying, something amazing happens. And then it all exists. I love that cartoon because that's really all we can do is somehow or other something amazing happens. And the signs are what we look forward to. Not the signs that people can produce and create, but the signs that God continues to give. Did you hear that the wise ones, even after being told, come back and tell me about this and so I can pay him homage, they followed a dream. They were given a dream and they went home by another way. If you don't take my word for it, you can take James, I just lost his name, musician, Taylor, thank you. That would be it. Because in my head is, maybe me and you can be wise guys too and go home another way. That's the hope that we have. Is that God has something more in mind for us than somebody taking all the power and somebody ruining life, someone killing others, and we see it. And it's easy to believe that evidence. However, fear, as I've said before, is false evidence appearing real. False evidence. The light shines and the darkness did not, cannot, will not overcome it. We got to take signs where we can get them, maybe from some reputable sources. I may not be a reputable source. It's up to you. But we have star words to help guide us. And these words were derived from lightness and goodness and ways that we share. And sometimes you and I just need a little bit of help along the way, like the three wise ones. And so a star that you're going to get today, that you'll receive, is a star that has a word on it. And it's a word to accompany you through this year. It's not a fortune. It's not something that says, follow these numbers. There are no numbers on them as far as I know. But it is just here one of those ways of us trusting the Holy Spirit that we are given at our baptism as a way to guide us. We've prayed over these stars that have these words, and you are prayed over a lot. And pray that this guidance that we receive will be something that leads us to know God's love. Because that is why God put on flesh in the person of Jesus. He came down, we're going to sing it in a minute. He came down that we may have love. He came down that we may have love. He came down. And I want to finish with this story from Indiana, of all places. Lana, I hope you think you know, is from Indiana. There was a little boy. We don't have his name. I got to pull up my information. Here it is. This story came in through Facebook yesterday, and I would like to describe it to you. There is a little boy in a striped shirt with jeans that barely cover the edge of his underoos, and he's lying on this terrazzo floor, highly polished. It looks like the entryway to Southeast, like the schools where they have those things. And lying next to him, he's got his head on his arms, and lying next to him is a police officer, and her name is Sergeant Precious Corner Jones. She is part of the Indiana State Police Capitol Police Section. She stepped in because this little boy was having a difficult time. He was having a rough morning, and when he got to school, his mom was there helping him out, and he just could not make it, and he laid on the floor and was having kind of, not so much a tantrum, but kind of a silent storm of his own. And the person reporting it says, he was just having a rough morning and he fell out on the floor. And the person reporting it says, I saw his mother step back and look. And she stated, this is how he is expressing himself lately. I decided to get on his level and talk to him, says this officer. He started to cry, so I wiped his tears and I told him it will be okay. As an adult, sometimes all we want is one person to stop, to get on our level, and maybe wipe our tears. These children, and all children, are entitled to bad days, just as we all are. So giving a moment to get down on their level, she got down on the floor with him and wiped his tears and said, it's going to be okay. That is what God did for us in this little baby. Got on our level and said, I know what you're going through, and we know he's going to eventually. Gold, yes. Frankincense, yes. Myrrh, oh yes. Doesn't say bad things won't happen. It says don't believe that that is the end of the story. For God put on flesh to get down at our level. It has been so, and it will continue to be so. Thanks be to God. Amen.